What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we've got some new Destiny 2 Forsaken DLC news to talk about. Got a few interesting details and things to round up. A lot of this comes in the form of a new interview. Yes, I'm just about as surprised as you guys are that we've had so many interviews regarding this expansion, but there's some cool new bits to talk about. We've also got a new exotic teaser video for the exotic bow that we'll see in the expansion, but we're going to talk about a new vendor that we'll see in the tower, a bunch of exotics in general, details about some new characters and potential motives of some of the characters, some interesting words about Prison of Elders, but I also wanted to round up a few other pieces of news related to Destiny 2. I want to say thank you to you guys for all of the support you've shown me here on the channel over the past few weeks. It's been going absolutely crazy, and of course that is thanks to you guys, so I really do appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this video, a like below would be super appreciated too. You've been absolutely killing it. But for now, let's jump straight into the news. Before we get into it, Bungie posted a new little teaser trailer for the Trinity Ghoul, the exotic bow that we'll see in the expansion, and so I figured you guys might want to check it out. So pretty neat little teaser that they posted on social media. We get to see a little bit more of the Tangled Shore and some of the interesting kind of fallen structures around this space. There are these interesting kind of pods as well, which do look like fallen tech. I don't know, it's got this kind of very Star Wars-y theme to it, I guess. But mostly we see them taking out a bunch of enemies with the bow. This is an exotic we've seen in the past, of course, but it's cool to just get little bits of new gameplay. Now though, I wanted to talk about a new interview with CriticalHit.net. They actually got the chance to speak to Lars Bakken at Bungie. We get a bunch of interesting new details. So they use the header, new exotics will continue to be absurdly powerful, and on that subject, Lars Bakken says, expect to see some things that you haven't seen before. One that we'll hint at, there's one specifically tied to Gambit, and you do see that in the trailer that we released. That's currently my favorite. I won't tell you its name, but it's very cool, very powerful, and he says it's very good at Gambit. So of course, he's hinting to that kind of Thorn style weapon, or a weapon that looks very similar to Thorn at least. We speculated a bunch about that weapon already, but it goes on to say, you saw the Drifter in Gambit. He's one of the new characters. There's going to be some returning characters and some new characters. Petra is coming back, but Drifter is a bit of a mystery, especially for everyone in Destiny. Slowly over time, he'll become familiar, but he does have his own agenda. He's sort of looking out for himself and he's doing his thing, which is great for you in terms of training in Gambit, but you don't fully understand what he's after yet. So that's pretty interesting in terms of the story. He's definitely a somewhat curious character, but they go on to say he's a character that you will not only interact with in Gambit, where it'll tell you what you're about to fight and how the teams are doing, but he will also be in the tower. You'll go and talk to him, you'll get missions from him and bounties. So that's confirmation that this guy will actually appear as a vendor in the tower, which is pretty interesting. He's not going to occupy any space in the reef or anything like that, at least not in the endgame. Of course, we do know that Cade 6 will be removed from the tower, but on the subject of his agenda and what he's kind of all about, what Gambit is about, we know a couple of things about him. The Gambit mode itself actually appears in a space currently called the Derelict when we see it in the director right here in the preview build. And because we know Gambit actually starts out aboard his ship, I'm assuming the Derelict is potentially the name of his ship. This is what you see in the intro section for Gambit, but it does have some interesting quotes when you actually go through the portal to attack a team in Gambit. He will say things like, embrace the darkness.
Embrace the darkness. Take out those guardians.
And obviously that's pretty strange because we are Guardians attempting to kill other Guardians. The fact that we also know this Thorn-styled weapon will come from the Gambit mode definitely suggests that it could be linked to the lore around the character and Gambit itself. Whether it's Thorn or it's a weapon related to Thorn, influenced by Thorn in some way, it definitely appears to be a weapon of sorrow. Lars Bakken also hints towards this weapon being very good for Gambit, which is pretty strange. Having played Gambit myself, I can say that, you know, enemies can be pretty aggressive or they can do a lot of damage. So if you're trying to collect motes and things like that, maybe a weapon which actually heals you over time. Potentially we could be seeing a sort of opposite effect to Thorn. Maybe it still has tick damage on other enemies, but it could actually be taking, you know, the taken theme of the weapon, the energy of other Guardians and regen in health or something like that. That could be really cool. But I'd be curious to hear any of your thoughts on this character, what you think his motive could actually be. On the subject of new characters and NPCs though, I want to point out it's a pretty interesting one that was noticed by Destiny Guides, credit to them for this. But of course we did see this Fallen Captain inside of the initial Forsaken vidoc, and it's a character that's actually addressing us the Guardian from the looks of it. You'll notice that this guy's kind of sitting on this interesting, almost like miniature spider tank type thing. But for a bunch of the weapons that we'll find in the Forsaken expansion, you can see that the flavor text comes from a character called the Spider. And so it seems pretty likely that that's who this is going to be. We also saw a developer working on their monitor where we could see this character, Commander Zavala, and Petra. Obviously, this will be a cutscene inside of the expansion, so this character, the Spider, will feature into the story, and presumably with how Bungie want to be doing things, the fact that we've got flavor text on weapons from this character as well, it looks like they could also be part of the endgame, which is pretty interesting. So it looks like we might have ourselves a fallen ally of some sort. Either way, it's certainly a character that we will interact with during the Forsaken. But to round up the other exotics we know about, of course, we spoke about Trinity Ghoul just a moment ago, and one of the traits for this weapon will be that precision kills will grant the next shot chain lightning capabilities, so it's a pretty interesting one. And on the subject of exotic bows, when Bungie posted the vidoc about making the bow, Josh Hamrick actually said some of the exotic bows, so he was referring to potentially multiple exotic bows being in this expansion. But we've also seen what appears to be a sort of quad barrel assault rifle. Definitely looks somewhat exotic. You've got 3 barrels around the kind of triangle on the outside of the weapon and then 1 in the very center. So it's a pretty strange looking thing. We have seen this very ornate new exotic sword, the Void Trace rifle, and we know a little bit about the Twin Rabbit exotic launcher. This one fires 2 rockets at once, one which is a suppressor projectile and then a second one which is a solar projectile with damage over time. But in terms of armor, we have seen this hunter with some interesting blue gauntlets. These seem to have some kind of ability relating to firing a weapon, potentially a bow. We've seen a hunter with some interesting Ahamkara scale styled gauntlets. With all of the references we've had with other pieces of gear to the Ahamkara, and especially for hunters, it seems that that is what these will be as well. We also saw a pretty interesting chest piece that this hunter was wearing with the kind of ornate metalwork similar to what you'd see on Crest of Alpha Lupi or something. For the Titan, we've seen this interesting kind of helmet skull type thing. Also some gauntlets which appear to be exotic, and then finally some Warlock boots that we know of, and these will actually grant various benefits for the new Arc Super that the Warlock gets. Next though, in the interview there is a conversation about the endgame, and Lars Bakken says if you were to talk to Steve Cotton, who's the creative lead on Forsaken, he'd say we're really diving back into the hobby, having players reinvest, not just reinvest on a weekly cadence, but on a daily cadence with things like bounties and multiple overlapping progressions in the form of triumphs. There'll be hundreds of things for players to do. So it's a pretty bold statement. Literally hundreds of things that players can go after is pretty interesting. But he adds that not only will you have really good daily rituals and talking to different vendors to get daily bounties, you're going to have your collection right in front of you that shows you how much of the legendary weapons and gear that you don't have yet. So you're going to have all of these things that you'll be chasing after. But of course, some of these pursuits, in fact many of them, will come from the Dreaming City. So I actually wanted to talk about this very briefly. I have this pretty interesting image of the Dreaming City right here, and in the sky on the right we can see these kind of rings in the clouds, and these are the same kind of structures that we saw in the early artwork for Forsaken. You actually also see them in the reef at the Tangled Shore. But of course the interesting thing is one area is the reef and the other is the Dreaming City, which is kind of in an unknown space. But considering that we can see these rings in both areas, yet they are in a very different space, almost on another world, it appears that the Dreaming City will actually be in some kind of alternate dimension, and the rings that we see in the sky could actually be something, you know, a kind of portal into that dimension itself. We also saw Prince Aldrin at the end of the Cade teaser, and he was walking away from Cade into what appeared to be some kind of portal. So it looks like that potential alternate dimension for the Dreaming City, some kind of awoken magic, which we of course may learn about, will actually be an important part or the basis of the spaces that we'll visit. But we get a few interesting words about Dreaming City. Lars Bakken says it's the first time we've ever made a destination that's specifically built around the endgame. So not only does the raid happen there, the raid is sort of your introduction to the Dreaming City, and then everything builds off that. And then he of course talks about how the Dreaming City is going to change over time. It'll be doing things that players won't expect and won't even know to look forward to. So all of that sounds cool, of course. I mainly wanted to point out that interesting possibility that the Dreaming City is in an alternate dimension, and you can pass potentially between that place and the reef via some kind of portal. But next they talk about characters and even the future of Prison of Elders potentially. So Lars Bakken in the Critical Hit interview said the funny thing about Aldrin is that if you were to talk to him, he would say that the things he is doing are correct. From his perspective, this killing of Cade, meeting up with the Barons and going out with what he's doing, he believes that he's on the side of the right. And that's what makes him such a complex and interesting villain. But on the subject of Aldrin, the story there, and even Prison of Elders, in a Twinfinite interview, they asked how screwed is the Prison of Elders? Is it officially out of business? And this was in reference to that first chapter of Forsaken. And Scott Taylor says, no, I think we want to repopulate it. They have some security problems in the reef. Old school players will know that there's a guy named Skolas who escaped from the the prison previously, but this is a much bigger riot situation. The fact that he says, though, we want to repopulate it is pretty interesting, so that could hint towards what we might be doing in the story. Maybe we'll be capturing barons in some instances and sending them back to the Prison of Elders and kind of restoring control. Or maybe it could actually be a hint to the potential use of Prison of Elders again. You know, what if you kind of repopulated it in some format during the Forsaken campaign, but then in the annual pass updates, maybe they bring a new activity that takes place there. Who knows, maybe this activity could even be in Forsaken. Although I do think additional activity content like that is probably more likely to be in Dreaming City because they are putting a lot of effort into that. Either way, it's some pretty interesting stuff. For the end of the interview though, they go on to talk about new subclasses. And the main thing I'd pick out of there really is that he specifies these new supers are essentially a third tree that you'll get inside of each subclass. I just wanted to point that out for clarity's sake, but they are absolutely separate paths that you can choose inside of the subclass. If you want to read any of this stuff, I will link this article down below, but I think we got some pretty interesting insights in there. Some of the stuff about exotics and the Drifter is pretty curious. We know that he'll definitely be housed in the tower at some point, and he's going to have bounties and missions specific to Gambit and maybe other stuff too, which is cool. So let me know any of your thoughts on the Forsaken stuff. Also a quick shout out though, Bungie posted the final Warmind webcomic. Definitely worth checking out if you're into the story stuff. This webcomic kind of breaks down some of the history with Anna Bray, how she was kind of led back to Mars to find Rasputin. There's some stuff about Owl Sector and a rather friendly friend of Anna Bray's. Some pretty cool backstory there for sure. Another quick shout, there will be a new Funko releasing. This one is supposedly a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive one, although I think often these end up being sold in GameStops and stuff like that later on. But there is a new Sweeperbot Funko available for Destiny 2 or coming out soon, so definitely worth checking that out if you're interested. But guys, that is going to round up yet another Destiny 2 Forsaken video. I hope you've enjoyed it as always. If you have, a like below is super appreciated. Let me know your thoughts on any of the content in this video. Thank you once again for tuning in. If you are new to this channel and you want to keep up to date with everything relating to Destiny 2, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on as well by hitting that bell next to the subscribe button. That'll mean you won't miss any videos, or at least it reduces the chance given how YouTube likes to mess things around. But otherwise guys, whatever you get up to, I hope you have an awesome day and I will catch you very soon.